I have to raise the question. How many people have to say that someone or something is being slept on until it's established that that thing is actually not being slept on? Because yesterday, Dan Orlovsky joined a couple other media members in tweeting out something about Anthony Richardson being slept on or flying under the radar. Here was the tweet from former Lions quarterback Dan Orlovsky. Quote, under the radar player who could throw the whole league off if he takes the leap. Once again, the question we always ask, what is the leap? Anthony Richardson. He is the third on-air personality from, ESPN or whatever to suggest that Anthony Richardson is being slept on, right? Kay Adams of FanDuel TV said it. Mina Kimes of ESPN also said it. And I don't know. I just kind of feel like we're at a point where people aren't actually sleeping on Anthony Richardson. No one's everyone, people are talking about him more than they're talking about Jalen Hurts. They are. And I get it. I understand why Anthony Richardson is the pick when it comes to guessing which year 2 quarterback is going to take a leap. Okay? It makes sense. Anthony Richardson is the obvious choice because when we look at the other 3 quarterbacks that were drafted relatively high and played a lot of games, he just makes the most sense. CJ Stroud. He had an incredible year 1. Okay, his rookie season was great. He played like a top 10 quarterback in the NFL last year. He won the AFC South. Okay, he won a playoff game. Okay, he was good last year. So in order for CJ Stroud to make a leap in year 2, being a fringe top 10 quarterback in the NFL last year, because once again, that is what he looked like. In order for CJ Stroud to make that leap, he would have to play as well as or better than players like Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, Trevor Lawrence, Matthew Stafford. That's a lot to ask of a year 2 quarterback. It is. And so when it comes to CJ Stroud, people aren't going to pick him to make the leap just because of how great he was his rookie season. Okay, when it comes to Bryce Young, the former number 1 overall pick going back to last year, he was bad last year. So it's like Jonathan, if people didn't want to pick CJ Stroud because he was so good, why wouldn't they pick Bryce Young, number 1 overall pick, and he was bad last year? Well, when we look at why Bryce Young was so terrible last year, it's because the players around him were awful. Okay? This is, once again, going to be the case this year. Bryce Young isn't in a position to take a year 2 leap because the Panthers roster is probably the worst in the NFL. People are going to write Bryce Young off this year because he's going to have another bad year. But it's hard for quarterbacks to play well when the offensive line in front of you isn't very good and your best wide receiver is 34-year-old Adam Thielen. It just is. Okay, Bryce Young doesn't have the proper supports to make a year 2 leap. Okay, he is surrounded by bad players and a rookie head coach. That is not the player that you want to bet on to take a year 2 leap. It's just not. That's not a great situation to be in. Will Levis, right? That he would be the third option when it comes to projecting which quarterbacks will take a year 2 leap. Will Levis played a decent amount of games last year. Okay, he played 9 games. The Titans went 3-6 in those games, and he just didn't look good. He didn't. He has a good roster around him, right? The Titans have done a good job of going out and addressing some needs. They bring in Calvin Ridley, him, DeAndre Hopkins, Treylon Burks. Those are 3 good wide receivers. They get rid of the head coach. They bring in a new, young, offensive-minded kind of guy. But the issue, once again, with Will Levis is that he didn't exactly light it up last year. The tape isn't great. He only completed 58% of his passes. He only threw 8 touchdowns in 9 games. He threw 4 interceptions. Like a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio isn't exactly what you want, especially when your quarterback's only throwing 8 touchdowns. So I don't think that that's a guy that the media wants to bet on because the tape and the production that we saw from him last year just wasn't very good. And that leaves us with Anthony Richardson, where you can see a lot of the things that you like. Just look at the dude. He looks like an NFL player. When you look at all the quarterbacks in this class, he looks like the guy that should be awesome because he's big and he's strong and he's fast and he has a big arm. Okay, like you can see all of these things immediately. He also didn't play much last year. Okay, if Anthony Richardson plays 12 games this year, then whoever discusses the idea or throws out the idea that Anthony Richardson will make a leap or that people are sleeping on him, they will be correct just if he plays this year. His number's going to go up in a big way if he's just available. And you would think that he would be. You would think that Shane Steichen and these dudes are going to grab him and be like, hey, man, let's not run as much. Let's stay on the field. Okay? And when you look at the other three guys, they just don't appear to be in positions to make year two leaps. And that leaves us with Anthony Richardson, who has a good head coach that seems to be more than capable of calling plays and putting players in positions to be successful. He did it in Philadelphia. He did it last year with the Colts, despite playing the majority of the season with a backup quarterback and no Jonathan Taylor. Okay? When we look at the offensive line, it's not terrible. When we look at the weapons, he's got some weapons. He does. Jonathan Taylor is a good running back that should be reliable this year. Michael Pittman Jr. is a good receiver. He's not a great one, but he's a good one. Okay, people seem to love A.D. Mitchell. And, the Colts have a whole stable's worth of tight ends. So, there's options for Anthony Richardson when it comes to weapons. And as I said, the offensive line, isn't terrible. And the head coach seems like he's pretty good. And so when you look around and compare it to the other three quarterbacks that were drafted last year, Anthony Richardson is in a much better situation than Bryce Young. Okay, and he doesn't have to be amazing like C.J. Stroud to be considered to have made a leap. All right, and when it comes to Will Levis just didn't look very good. And the small amount that we saw from Anthony Richardson, I thought he looked better than Will Levis, which isn't saying much. Anthony Richardson is the clear choice when choosing second-year quarterbacks who could possibly take a leap. The question is obviously, will he? Will he take the leap that people are expecting of him this year? Let me translate that to, can he stay healthy this year? Because that's really what this is all dependent upon. If Anthony Richardson is available, he'll be fine because Shane Steichen is a good head coach who's going to put him in spots where he can succeed. Okay? And I think the other thing that plays a role in this is the one full game that we watched from Anthony Richardson last year. He threw for 2 touchdowns and he ran for another. Okay? Let's ignore the fact that he was 11 of 25 throwing the ball against the Rams. But look, in the red zone, he was good. And I think that's a large part of what people look for. I think it is much easier for a coach to help a player improve at the quarterback position between the 20s, right? Because there's more field to play with. You have more options in terms of running the ball and doing those things. In the red zone, though, field's smaller, and obviously that makes it harder to throw the ball and to be productive. For Richardson, though, he was good in the red zone last year, which is a good sign for the future. And I think that's why people are picking him to make this year 2 leap. It is completely feasible for Anthony Richardson to have a season where he throws for 23 touchdowns and rushes for another 12. Okay, that's a 35 touchdown season. And if he does that, then he'll be a legit threat and the Colts will be a legit playoff team. If he does that, and I don't think that that's out of the question. So he just has to stay on the field and he has to stay healthy.